depression or any form of mental distress. If I found out one of my clients admitted that they prey on kids, I would wait until I'm in a safe place, and I would immediately call the police. I would call any group of people that I'm legally and ethically and medically required to call. There would be no thought going through my head about, should I report? What are the legalities? Even if there wasn't a law that forced me to do it, I would still do it. Nothing could keep me from reporting. A pack of rabid dogs couldn't keep me from reporting. I would hike 10 miles to the nearest police station to report. Anything less, you are a horrible human being. And the only exception to that is if you're a survivor and you're too scared to report it, or you don't have kids involved, and it's just you and another adult. I could understand where you're too afraid to leave, too afraid to report. But if you can't report, tell someone and they can report. And if not immediately, when you feel safe. And what's worse than protecting the church or protecting the reputation or intimidating and threatening, and even if that doesn't take place, women have to think twice before reporting, because they're going to lose everything. Everything. And if they don't, then they're lucky, or they just happen to be in a denomination that obeys the law and has empathy toward them. Another reason why churches don't consistently report or talks survivors out of going to the police is because, and this one's really sad, they want to protect the abuser. And this isn't just something that happens in religious homes. This is in families, businesses, countries. I mean, the more money you make, the more money your family has, the higher chance the abuse will be covered up. Because anytime there's money, land, and a legacy involved, the odds of someone reporting it just drop 50%. And religious environments specifically attract predators because of the patriarchal system that enables, teaches, hides, and threatens. And threats don't always have to be verbal or physical. They can just teaching people from the cradle that if a woman steps out of the umbrella of authority of a man, she's violating God's laws. Women believe that when you get married in a Christian environment, you obey your husband, you submit. These kind of beliefs make it almost impossible for women to even mention abuse out loud, not even to a position of authority, but to her own friends. If abuse happens, the family hides it. The survivors dissociate and talk about their abuser in a positive light. Not all the time, but it's very consistent. Everyone protects the abuser. It seems that way, anyway. And I've heard of parents who show more empathy, kindness to an abusive brother than they do to the female sister survivors. If you've ever watched 19 Kids and Counting, you'll know what I mean. What kind of parents prioritize a son who's a molester, his needs, his comfort, and his life prospects over sisters that he harmed? Like, what kind of monsters were their parents? And in my opinion, anyone who knows what's going on, covers it up, refuses to report, should spend time in prison. That should be the law. Anyone who knowingly helps, prevents, and talks survivors out of going to the police should be convicted of aiding and abetting abuse. Even if it's not the law, then it should be. The idea that there is institutional loyalty. Christian leaders in churches or in Christian institutions can develop a sense of loyalty to fellow clergy, or an institution of overriding their duty to protect vulnerable people. In these cases, covering up abuse becomes a way of protecting their own kind. This is why, in the secular world, why wives of cops don't usually report their husbands. Because if their abusive spouse is a member of law enforcement, the odds of you getting out alive are probably a lot less than a woman whose husband is a construction worker. The husband who's a cop can turn all the cops against her, and cops are one of the 3 professions with the highest divorce and abuse. What about churches who fail to understand legal obligations? Now, ignorance of the law is no excuse, but let's be honest. How many people actually Google the laws in your state on anything? No one in my family ever does it, and I've asked them. Churches, there's so much ignorance of the law. While laws vary in many states require clergy or any person in a medical or professional hierarchy of leadership to report suspected child abuse, violence, domestic abuse, regardless of the clergy or any form of legal, ethical, or professional privilege. Some churches fail to train their staff on these mandatory reportive laws. Some have trained but fail to consistently uphold and give consequences and fire people who don't. Others may intentionally disregard their legal responsibilities for personal gain. Maybe they have a close relationship to the predator, or they just don't care. There are a lot of people like that, and it's not just in church, trust me. And it goes beyond intimidating people or humiliating them for going to the police. It's because that the survivors have gotten out of the toxic role they're required to play. Women are less than. Women are man's helpers, not the other way around. Women never are the center of religious leadership, and it's a problem. Women are taught from the cradle in these extreme fundamentalist parts of Christianity that they were created to be a wife, a mother. They worship marriage, they worship the nuclear family, they demonize anyone who isn't in a nuclear family. Women are taught to be subordinate, to be quiet, to be submissive, to be anything that isn't masculine. And this is where the root of homophobia and transphobia comes from. Because men in these Christian environments of fundamentalism think they would rather die than do a womanly role. That's how little they think of femininity. And what about men who are survivors of domestic and sexual violence? What if their girlfriend or wife is a husband beater? It's something that's not talked about nearly enough